Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. I'm your host, Dave Kluge. Once again, I am joined with two incredible guests. Today, we've got Matt Waldman with Footballguys and Daniel Harms with the FF Astronauts. We're going to be looking ahead at some Week 5 matchups. It is crazy to think how fast this season is going by. But we're going to talk about Kyle Pitts and whether you should panic about Kyle Pitts yet, whether he is even worth a starting spot in your lineup at this point. We're going to talk about J.K. Dobbins and whether his breakout from last week is real. Is he a top 15, top 20 running back going forward? We're going to discuss that. We're also going to look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Isiah Pacheco has been carving out a bigger role every single week. Is it time for Clyde Edwards-Helaire managers to get worried? We have a great show lined up for you today, so be sure to stick through to the very end of this week's episode of The Launchpad. Are you starting Kyle Pitts this week? That and so much more on today's episode of The Launchpad. Matt, we're going to keep this first question really simple. Are you starting Kyle Pitts in your fantasy leagues this week?
Probably not. And a big reason for that is that it's not really Kyle Pitts' fault, as we all pretty much know. But I don't think it's necessarily all Arthur Smith's fault either. I think it's understanding that when you look at Marcus Mariota, they're trying to allow him to read the field with one or two reads at most and then let him run, because they understand that if he has to make full field reads while there may be pressure filtering into the pocket, that's playing to his absolute weakness. And they don't want him making bad decisions while under pressure in the pocket. So as a result of that, what you're seeing is that a lot of the schemed looks that go to Pitts are because Drake London is being used as bait, or Drake London getting opportunities because Kyle Pitts is being the bait. And teams are a little bit more afraid of Kyle Pitts than they are of Drake London, whether that's rightfully so or not. Kyle Pitts is the established option, and the way that they line him up and use him, and with his long speed down the field, they feel like they'd rather see Marcus Mariota complete an 8, 9, 10, 12 play drive and win that way, dinking and dunking it to London or somebody else and running the ball, than like a huge play to Pitts. So I'd rather look elsewhere, and there are some options that I think that could probably be, may not have the upside, but you're going to get points.
Yeah, and we keep hearing that. Everybody just seems to echo the same thing over and over again. Oh my goodness, Arthur Smith is ruining Kyle Pitts. But I think you hit it on the head, because Arthur Smith was there last year and Kyle Pitts was doing just fine, but he has to tailor the offense to Marcus Mariota, and that does make it difficult. So Daniel, same question to you. Are you starting Kyle Pitts with any smidge of confidence this week?
No, and it's not because of any of that. It's because he's injured right now. He's not practicing, and that comes because I would still have a hard time saying yes or no if he was fully healthy, because I want to start Kyle Pitts. It doesn't matter. I also have a small inkling that Desmond Ridder is going to be the starting quarterback before long, and that helps me elevate and think that he's going to be able to get the ball to Kyle Pitts a little bit more. You can manage the offense a little bit differently with Kyle Pitts, with a Desmond Ridder, than you can Marcus Mariota. So again, nothing to do with the skill set or even the fact that he's not being used in the same way that he was last year. I don't know if he's going to play. So I really can't. And even if he does, what's to say he's going to be anywhere near what he's been even the last couple of weeks? So I can't confidently say right now, as we record this, that I have any level of bearing what he's going to play, and if he does, how healthy he's actually going to be.
Yeah, and the audience knows by now. That does make it a little bit tough when we pre-record the show. We are recording on Thursday afternoon. The show will come out Friday morning. Who knows? By the time the show comes out, this could be a moot point. But before we get into guest introductions, Matt, let me just throw one more question over to you, because Daniel talked about it a little bit, that there is a chance that Desmond Ridder takes over at some point this season. I am also expecting that to happen. When, or if I should say, Desmond Ridder becomes the quarterback, does that change the way that you're looking at Kyle Pitts at all?
A little bit. There's going to be more boom bust value for him, mainly because Ridder has a little bit more arm talent. He certainly can move around the pocket and buy time, but I think he's a little more dynamic moving around the pocket as opposed to being a straight line runner. The upside is that he will make daring throws, and especially because he's young, he's a rookie, and he's used to doing that at Cincinnati. Yeah. The downside is, does he know when to heed when he should take more caution? And I think the answer is decidedly no. So you'll see some games where it may get away from them, but he may throw himself into more chances fantasy wise. So there's definitely more upside for Pitts with Ridder, even if it's not good for the Atlanta Falcons record wise.
Yep. And in this show, we talk about a lot of matchup based stuff, but I'll just talk on a macro level. if you drafted Kyle Pitts, don't freak out and sell low on him right now. There's still a lot of season left. Yeah, it's been a disappointing start to the season, but I have seen some trades where people are just completely giving up hope on Kyle Pitts. And I think it's a little bit too early to go into full-blown panic mode quite yet. But anyway, let me get into some introductions here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We are now on to episode 49 of the Launchpad. And Matt, I should have just scheduled you for next week because I just realized that while we were recording today that you were the first ever guest I had on this show. And now here we are full circle, almost a year later. You are back on the show. Thrilled to have you back on. You can find most of Matt's content over at Footballguys, but he's also got the rookie scouting portfolio, which is fantastic. And I highly recommend checking that out. But Matt, let everyone know where they can find you on social media. Let them know where they can find your content and all of that good stuff.
Sure. Keep it simple at Matt Waldman on Twitter. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room, which has got over 650 videos dating back from the beginning of time. And then I've been doing TikTok over the past few months, so you can find me at Matt Waldman RSP, where I do some highlight videos there. And of course, Matt Waldman's RSP, mattwaldmanrsp.com. You can find my work there, along with, of course, the weekly content that I put out at Footballguys.
Now, Matt, I'm not just trying to butter you up, but those videos that you put out where you just kind of do these quick little film breakdowns where you'll just take one play, talk about it for a minute and a half or 2 minutes. Some of my favorite content out there. And there aren't a lot of people that do it well. There's, you and Baldy and Jetpack Galileo, there's a handful out there doing it, but you are one of the best at it. So please don't ever stop doing that, because those videos, when they come out, are must watch. Just these quick little videos that kind of give you a peek inside the game. And that's why we brought Daniel on today. Daniel Harms over at FF Astronauts. He also has a film first process when looking at fantasy football. I was on his show just a couple months away, blown away by the knowledge that you were able to provide. And I think this is going to be a really fun show for the viewers, with two guys that kind of look at the game a little bit different than most people who are watching football through spreadsheets when trying to analyze fantasy. So Daniel, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media and where all of your content can be found.
Really appreciate that. Love being on here with one of the guys I really looked up to when I first started doing it, in Matt. So I appreciate that. You guys can find me on Twitter at InHarmsWay19. Pretty much everywhere that I am, my @ will be at InHarmsWay19. Makes it very easy for you to find me on Twitter, on TikTok. I also do YouTube videos for the RGR Football channel, which is just covers the Chiefs content specifically, but that's all film as well. So rgrfootball.com, you can find me there. And then I do the Fantasy Football Astronauts podcast weekly as well. Thank you very much.
And we will absolutely get into some Chiefs content in a little bit. Definitely want to talk about that game. That will be a fun one. But we already started talking a little bit about Atlanta Falcons playing in Tampa Bay this week. And I want to talk about Caleb Huntley, because right now everybody's going crazy over Tyler Algier. And, he's got the draft capital and he was getting some buzz this offseason. But Huntley looked pretty darn good last week. So, Daniel, start us off here. If we are looking at Cordero Patterson, who is now on IR, going to miss the next few weeks, is there a chance that Caleb Huntley can overtake Tyler Algier in this backfield as the primary back?
I think there's a chance that it could be any one of the three, because don't forget, Damian Williams is also coming back from injury at some point, and this is going to be a very muddied backfield without Cordero Patterson. So any given week, one of these guys could be the guy. But Caleb Huntley, again, undrafted a couple years ago. This is his first time getting actual NFL game. When you watched him play against the Cleveland Browns last week, that offensive line, that they were just moving people in the run game. Arthur Smith brought over that dynamic run game from Tennessee 2 years ago, and now he's really implemented it. They've got a couple, studs on their offensive line, which didn't necessarily thought it was going to be, but they've come in and actually established the running game. But the one thing when I was watching Huntley is that he seemed much more patient. He's not necessarily going to blow you away with your runs. Algier kind of likes to bust it outside a little bit. I noticed that he wants to get outside. He doesn't even have that top level gear, but he still wants to get there. And you see some vision and patience and more burst aspect to Huntley than I did when I saw Algier, but he really likes to get that ball to the outside. So I think that when you're looking specifically at whether you can actually take over a backfield, the consistency with your vision paired with the ability to stay patient and wait for those blocks to unfold. Sometimes those cutback lanes in your outside zone take a little bit to see. And when you're constantly trying to break it outside, you don't have that cutback lane, because we've seen those cutback lanes go for 20, 40, 60 yards at a time because you have some over pursuit from the defense. So I think you might see Huntley and Algier both get some explosive plays. But for me, it's all about consistency. I think that's what Arthur Smith's going to be looking for without Cordero Patterson. So whoever that is that's going to be doing that, Huntley right now, I think, has a good opportunity to do it. We're just going to kind of see how they end up taking it from there.
And when we talk about these things, talk about how they wait for the offensive line to open up blocks and the vision and the patience, those aren't things that you're going to see looking at a player's profile or you're going to learn from the combine. You can only get that from watching the game. And I am not a scout. You guys blow me away with your knowledge when it comes to, watching the game and being able to break down film. But Caleb Huntley just popped off the screen. When you watch this guy, he's got a lot of juice. It is very rare that a guy goes out and has a big game. And I can hop onto, one of my deep dynasty leagues with 25 bench spots and still find that guy available on waivers. Caleb Huntley was on waivers in every single league that I'm in. Most people didn't even know this guy's name prior to last week. So Matt, talk to me a little bit about what you saw from Caleb Huntley. Does he have the makings to be a team's running back one?
I don't necessarily think he's going to be like a team's running back one long term. That's for sure. And I agree with Daniel that Damian Williams is the guy you're going to ultimately want to look for if he comes back soon. But at the same time, if you're this week and next, you're thinking Caleb Huntley or Tyler Algier, certainly the draft capital is going to have an influence because teams invest more money. And then that way management feels like that they have to justify the pick. But the thing is with Huntley is that he ran the best between the tackles inside. And if you look at the Browns defense last week, while I'm not taking anything away from Atlanta's run blocking unit, they've been pretty darn good all year. But let's remember that Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett were out of that game. It's kind of like saying, you won a 4-round exhibition with Mike Tyson and outpointed him without telling people that Mike Tyson was in a straitjacket and had a head guard with, on top. And he was only allowed to headbutt you because there were no arms or pinchers to basically protect. I mean, the edge was softer than Charmin, basically for these guys, especially for Algier running outside. And if you don't trust Daniel and I talking about what you see, and I think you should, because we watch these guys. Tiki Barber, who is was one of the better backs in the league in his generation, was on that broadcast talking about how Caleb Huntley looked better because he understood how to stay on his track once he picked the crease, and you could see that he's not as fast as Algier, and as Daniel said, Algier's not a high-end explosive guy, but Huntley is very powerful. He is a good contact balance runner and understands his game well enough to know that I need to stay on track so that I can stay downhill and win. Jeff Schwartz, the former Chiefs lineman, was commenting on Nick Chubb this week or today about one of the things that he does so well is that he stays on track so that he can utilize his gifts of power, as soon as he makes that cut. And Huntley has some of that to his game. So if Arthur Smith is looking at who's the guy who's best on film, Huntley's going to get more carries this week, and it's going to be even, and then they may determine it from there. If they're just going by draft capital, Algier's a guy. But in fantasy, you want to get the guy who's the cheapest if it's muddy, because there's little to lose if you pick wrong. And I think Huntley's that guy.
Now, am I out of line to compare Caleb Huntley a little bit to Khalil Herbert? Because that's what I saw in his game. Somebody who isn't, just dripping with talent, doesn't have that real explosiveness, but just understands how to find those running lanes and pick up chunk plays. Do you see any of that, Waldman, or am I a little bit out of line with this comparison?
Well, I liked Herbert a lot, so I saw Herbert as more of like a Dalvin Cook starter kit. Maybe you don't have the advanced options that are Dalvin Cook-esque, but the archetype of players there. I would say that Huntley is more of a starter kit for I'm trying to remember his name, and I can't remember his name. The former 49ers back who's played everywhere now.
Frank Gore?
No, after Gore from Ohio State.
Carlos Hyde.
Carlos Hyde.
There you go.
It's more Carlos Hyde, Bo Scarborough starter kit.
Gotcha.
Lacking the short area explosion of those two. Thank you for helping me, because I can't remember some of these guys' names anymore after a while.
It's a long season. I totally get it. But let's switch gears and talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the other side of the ball here. And I want to talk about Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, because Chris Godwin was, he's been dealing with injuries all season. We had that Mike Evans suspension a couple weeks ago, but it looks like both of these guys are going to be healthy and active now heading into this week. So, we got a nice little Russell Gage spike week when Mike Evans wasn't playing. And, we've been getting cute and streaming Kyle Rudolph and Cameron Brate and kind of using any piece we can in Tampa Bay. But now that we're looking at a healthy and active Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, start us off here, Daniel. Is there any other wide receiver or tight end that you should even be thinking about starting in fantasy this week?
So there's only one guy that I'm thinking about, and it's only if Cameron Brate doesn't play. I like Cade Otton. He was my tight end 3 out of this last draft class. And when you look at what he did, out of halftime, he did get 4 targets, so it's not a whole bunch. They were throwing the ball a lot. But I do think that Tampa Bay in this game is going to want to reestablish a little bit of dominance over a fellow in-division foe after getting pantsed by the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. I don't think that they want to abandon the run game. And I think that will want to help with their play action a little bit. But Cade Otton, one of the things that I liked about him is that he's not like a super athlete. Like these tight ends of this draft class weren't the best. They weren't the Kyle Pitts type of players, but he runs good routes. He competes at the catch point. Those are 2 things that Tom Brady likes. If you can be counted on to be in the right place at the right time, and you can compete at a catch point and be physical, that's what can get you into Tom Brady's good graces. So while we kind of want all parts of this passing attack at times, if Cameron Brate misses time, and I think that right now he did miss a practice or 2 with his concussion. So there is now room that you could see Cade Otton getting viable snaps in an offense that does want to use play action over the middle of the field. And that's where Cade Otton can really become someone you want to stream this week in fantasy.
Matt, I see you nodding aggressively to everything Daniel was saying here. So talk to us a little bit about Cade Otton. Is he the guy that you're looking at, or is there somebody else in Tampa?
I kind of like Otton there too, because he's a smooth, like he said, he's a smooth route runner. He really, and it's not just the vertical routes. He really understands how to position himself at the catch point. And that's a valuable resource that when you see these upper echelon tight ends who everyone in fantasy abandons about 3 years too early, who wind up having that old man game, guys who look like me, who get out on the basketball court and look like they're out of shape. But you can't, as soon as you get the ball in the lane, like they school the guy who's like twice as athletic as them. Now, I'm not that guy, but I knew guys like that when I was growing up and who were doing that to me. And they have that old man game. And it's an ability to really pivot and snap their turns and earn position in a way that they can, and they're going to be reliable with the tight target. And that's something that Otton already does. Otton really understands leverage well enough that he's a decent blocker in the ways that they're going to use him. They're not going to Gronk him, but they're certainly going to use him in ways that a lot of tight ends get away with being pretty good at. And, the part of that is that Godwin's going to be that quick hitting guy. And he's going to win on a lot of the quick hitting, option routes and adjustments. Going to be on the same page with Brady. Evans is going to be your deep play action guy. And that's going to force, your one-on-ones with AJ Terrell and then the safety probably over top. That's going to leave the room open for either Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White or Otton on some of those mid-range plays. And probably it's going to be the mid-range plays that they're really aiming for. There's those over routes and the sail routes and the things like that get you those chunks of 15 to 30 yards. And that's where Otton could shine.
So you mentioned Rachaad White. And I want to talk about him a little bit because I don't want to say we're seeing a changing of the guard. I think it's way too early to say that, but Leonard Fournette saw a season low in snaps last week. Rachaad White, we saw him doing a lot more than just what he was, billed to be as a pass catcher. He actually looked pretty good as a runner, and he got some goal line work in it last week as well. So, Matt, since we already talked about it, let's stay on that topic here. How does this impact Leonard Fournette? I mean, is this a sign of things to come? Should we be concerned that this is going to be more of a split backfield going forward?
I think it's a sign of things to come in 2025, maybe 2024. It certainly could happen sooner if Fournette gets hurt, and he's certainly a guy you want to monitor this year, maybe even preemptively pick up on a deeper roster because he could be thrust into action where he gets the full-time looks. But if things remain as they are, let's remember they were down early and that they were throwing the ball a lot, and Fournette himself still had more targets, more receptions, and a touchdown as a receiver, and they had pretty much similar snaps. It's nice, though, that Rachaad White got enough snaps and got a red zone look, which tells you that they're becoming more confident in his preparation and his execution. But at the end of the day, in 2-minute drill, unless he's taken over the 2-minute drill or deep into the fourth quarter in a close game, Fournette remains the guy, and that's what happened last week, and it's going to stay that way.
Yeah, sitting on a 3-year contract, probably not going anywhere anytime soon. Daniel, before we move to the next game, do you have anything that you would like to add about Rachaad White?
No, I mean, he played it out perfectly. And really, if you get that 2-minute drill roll, you can find real value. But the problem is that offensive line in Tampa Bay, it's garbage. It's very bad. And the one guy, I promise you, that Tom Brady's going to want out there protecting him is Leonard Fournette over the rookie. And again, he talked about the targets 7 to 5 in favor of Leonard Fournette. they had 6 total rushes on the game. That's not going to be something that goes forward. So Leonard Fournette is still going to be the guy. I'm not as high as a lot of people on Rachaad White. I was actually one of the less people. I was like, I watched this guy. He's big, but he's not physical, and he comes down in contact far more than I like to see. So I know that everyone wants to see the young wave come in and see Rachaad White take over. I feel like when you see Leonard Fournette on the field, Tom Brady is going to be like, no, I don't want this guy who's going to fall down. I want the guy who's has proven to churn out yards and to continuously find ways to just catch the ball. His career receiving has been kind of revived, and that's something that most people didn't expect, but it wasn't like bad in Jacksonville. It was just different, and now Tom Brady's getting him to the ball in different ways. So yeah, I'm firmly in the camp of Leonard Fournette for the rest of the season.
Can I add a couple points to piggyback on Daniel? Because one of the things is that people forget that Leonard Fournette, coming out of high school, literally he looked like he could have been a tight end prospect with how often he caught the football. And then on top of that, when you look at Fournette and what he does best, is that he accelerates into contact to run through people. He's an old school back in that respect. If Rachaad White, and this is a very hard thing to teach or to want to willingly learn, if you're not doing it by the time you get to the pros, you're probably not going to do it very often. But Rachaad White, if I could be Dr. Frankenstein and take a behavior out of Leonard Fournette, just like a little bit, and inject it into Rachaad White's brain and let it grow, it would be that I need to accelerate into contact and realize I'm a big man who can win when there's a linebacker in the hole and it's a big crease and you press there and you get 2 steps into the crease, and instead of going, I need to bounce it outside, when that's the guy you need to attack. So instead of losing 3 yards trying to do that, he might gain 7 running through a guy.
And I'm sure you've seen the mic'd up clips with Leonard Fournette, right? Where he's got the microphone on him, you can hear him on the field, and he giggles as he's going into contact. Like he loves it.
He's a crazy man.
Up about hitting people. Yeah.
He and Gronkowski had a similar mindset in that regard, and that's old football, and that's the thing that's the thing that it's hard to teach, and if you have that, you covet it.
Yeah, and we saw that with Hard Knocks, which I'm sure you watch, but DeAndre Swift, he would always rip off these big runs, and then rather than finishing the run, he would just kind of step out of bounds, and Deuce Staley ripped into him, and we saw that on Hard Knocks. And then in week 1, we see DeAndre Swift running down the field, and you see where he's about to run out of bounds, and no, he dropped his shoulder and he ran through the defender to pick up those final 3 yards. So it is still a coachable aspect, even at a higher level. But Daniel, I just want to go back to one thing that you mentioned about or talked about, and that was protecting Tom Brady. One of my favorite stats to drop. Last year, in 2021, Leonard Fournette had more pass blocking opportunities than every other running back in Tampa Bay combined. Did not allow a single QB hit. Every other running back gave up at least 1 sack. Leonard Fournette didn't allow 1 hit on Tom Brady last year. So that's just unbelievable. That's why he got the contract. That's why he's going to maintain his role as long as Tom Brady is the quarterback there. Let's go ahead and pivot, talk about a different game. Baltimore Ravens at Cincinnati Bengals. This is one of many marquee matchups this weekend. This should be a really fun game. We're looking at an over-under of 48, which feels a little bit low for the offensive talent in this game. But I want to talk about J.K. Dobbins because he just had a huge fantasy performance in week 4, and it was buoyed by 2 goal line touchdowns. But I think that that's kind of a sign of things to come. I think that that's going to be his role going forward. So we talked about this on the Mailbag show on Wednesday, actually, with Chris Allen and Victoria Geary, but I want to have the same conversation with you two. Daniel, are we looking at J.K. Dobbins as a top 15, top 20 running back? How should we be viewing him for the rest of the season?
I would lean more to top 20 instead of top 15. And the reason is because even when you look at his games from his rookie season, last week was his 2nd game with over 18.5 points. He's only had 3 games over 15 points in his career to this point. And obviously you want to see him get those carries. He did look better, but I still think that his recovery is in process. That's fine. It's not Cam Akers' problem because J.K. Dobbins can play the position. He has good vision. He has an understanding of leverage and reading his blocks. That's the biggest problem with what we're seeing with Cam Akers is he was an athlete playing running back and not a running back that was really freaky athletic. So he's having trouble reading. J.K. Dobbins is understanding his body still has some way to go. But you still have to figure Gus Edwards now, his 21-day practice window just opened up. We know that the RB1 in Baltimore is Lamar Jackson. They like to use multiple running backs. I would love to say J.K. Dobbins a top 15 running back the rest of the season, but we still don't know how his body's going to handle the work. He's coming off of a bigger workload. Obviously, they're still ramp up. I like what I saw. I like his vision. I still think that he's got some ways to go with a total pass catching back role. But right now, I think the next couple of weeks, we're going to see him get more of that role. Obviously, Kenyon Drake hasn't been anything. These guys behind him are nothing you have to worry about. I do think that when Gus Edwards gets back on the field, he might carve his way back. But again, we're seeing Justice Hill have an impact on the offense too. So I would love, more than anything, to say that J.K. Dobbins, I love him coming out of Ohio State. I love them coming out. I would love to say that he can be an RB, like a top 15 running back the rest of the way. I need to see the workload, because at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson is the man. He's going to have the goal line carries to himself whenever he wants them. And that indecision and understanding of the offense itself is just something I can't sign off on just yet.
And we saw the pass catching a little bit in college, but we didn't see it much as a rookie. But I will say that last year, it seemed like there was a change in the Baltimore Ravens offense. We saw almost no targets going to running backs in 2019 and 2020. Then last year we saw it with Devonta Freeman. All of a sudden he started commanding targets and catching a lot of checkdowns out of the backfield. So I'm hoping that there is some sort of change in Lamar Jackson's play where we can start to see J.K. Dobbins get involved in the passing game, because we know that that's really how you elevate a running back from being, a solid RB2 to that elite RB1 is getting those targets. So Matt, same question to you. How are we feeling about J.K. Dobbins? Are you putting him top 15, top 20, or am I getting a little ahead of myself here?
Well, I think that Daniel makes terrific points about him, because again, he's coming back off of injury. From what I've seen, he's showing confidence with his ability to make certain cuts that if you're not confident with your leg, you wouldn't have been able to do what he's done. So that's a real positive. I liked his receiving skills at Ohio State from what I saw. He's a sound pass catcher. I think he understands how to work, leak into the flats and work over the middle when they used him. But of course, for me, I've always looked at quality as opposed to quantity when it comes to receiving backs, because like Leonard Fournette, he barely caught the ball, he and Gordon. But if you saw enough tape, you could see enough on 2 or 3 plays that there was enough criteria to say that's translatable, as long as he learns to read coverages on the same page as his quarterback. And I think Dobbins can do that. And what I liked about that is that they used him on a shovel pass, which is a difficult throw, a difficult situation in the red zone. They trusted him enough there. They used him on a route where he leaked out of the backfield and got great depth for a big play in the middle of the field there. So I kind of like what they had going on with that. Justice Hill obviously looks more explosive at this point. And he's certainly a good scat back option. But this is one of those things that it has to come down to this. If you play too conservatively and say, well, he's a top 20 value, then you're not going to be able to deal for him, because the people who want to deal him away, you're going to have to pay more than that. And so you have to come down to say, could he be a top 15 or top 10 pick for you? And are you willing to go to bat for that? And I would say, if I'm going to take a risk on a player, that would be the risk I would take. And I like Dobbins enough to say it may not work, but if I need to, I'm going to try it. I will pay top 12 to top 15 money, maybe a little bit more, just because Ronnie Stanley's now back, so that's going to be a little better for their line, or he's coming back. That should be better for their line. You also understand that, Jackson has done a better job with cross-field reads and being very quick with some of the reads he makes. So I think he's going to do a little bit better job with check down. And he, even though that you may not, the number of touches may not absolutely be there, he did get a lot of red zone looks the past 2 games relative to the touches he had. So, and at the end of the first game, he said, I'm looking forward. Now the next step for me is to start doing what I expected to do, which is get 100 yards in games and have days like that. I don't think you say that unless the coaching staff expects that of you right away. I mean, some guys do, but I think that a lot of guys, especially on a Baltimore Ravens team, would probably know what their role is and wouldn't go too far out of line of that. So I think he has expectations that he's going to be the guy once he's fully there.
And I think it's one of those things where you do kind of have to plant a flag early. I mean, there are still some concerns with Gus Edwards coming back potentially, and maybe some concerns about a setback with his recovery. But I'm looking right now at consensus rankings, and when I say top 15, I'm looking at the other guys that are ranked. These are the guys 15, 16, and 17 right now in consensus ranking: Dameon Pierce, James Conner, AJ Dillon. I think J.K. Dobbins is a higher ceiling than all of those guys. Breece Hall is in there. I think Breece Hall, I might prefer Breece Hall to J.K. Dobbins, but then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders. I mean, it seems like J.K. Dobbins' name should be in the conversation with all of those guys and not 10, 15 spots afterwards.
Yeah, it's just between offensive line. Some of those guys have better offensive lines, which is going to help them along. And that's the underrated part that fantasy doesn't always touch upon. But at the same time, Dobbins' talent, if he elevates his game and gets better, as Daniel pointed out, yeah, that could be the difference. But I think if you're being realistic, Daniel's take is the most realistic. Mine is more about if you're gonna get him and pay for him, you've got to plant the flag. And I'd be willing to do that with some teams. If I feel like I need a little extra and I need to go big or go home with a guy, that would be the guy I would probably bet on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's stick with this game, and I want to talk about Rachaad Bateman. Again, we're recording this on Thursday afternoon. Right now, we don't have any clear word, but it seems like Rachaad Bateman is trending towards being out this week. That could change by the time this comes out Friday afternoon, but let's put on our imagination hats, pretend that Rachaad Bateman is not going to play this week. Who is the next guy up? Is it Devin Duvernay? Is it James Prochet? Is it DeMarcus Robinson? Daniel, start us off here. Who should we be trying to stream, if anybody, on this Baltimore Ravens wide receiver room?
I mean, can Lamar Jackson throw it to himself? Can he just throw it up and let him go run after it? I'm looking at this wide receiver room. It's not a lot of fun, but there's one guy that I like, and that's because I liked him coming out of college, out of Coastal Carolina. I think Isiah likely could be in line for a little bit more targets this week. He's already third or fourth on the team in targets with the way that it's shaped up to this point. And I know that I have a theme here. I like these young, talented tight ends. And he was my tight end one coming out, funny enough, even though he's not the blocker. And most of the guys in the draft are. He's probably just a pure wide tight end. He's not going to be anything in terms of blocking. But for me, when I look at the receiving aspect, I think that his speed, a lot of people talk about his 40 time. I don't care. I don't care about his 40 time. That dude ran away from teams in college, and he still has that speed. We saw a little bit on display in the preseason. He does have some stop and start ability, some make you miss, some yak opportunities as well. He's got good understanding of where to be on the field and how to beat linebackers in coverage, to get open and to create separation. While there isn't a ton of separation to be had, he understands how to position his body and catch the football. Things that I really appreciate about the tight end position, that he could also be this underrated receiver in Baltimore. So I think he's going to, regardless, get more snaps because they always like to run two tight ends anyway. They want to be able to be multiple with their run fits, their run looks, and different ways they can attack down the field out of 12, 13 personnel at times. We've seen it year and time again with Hayden Hurst, Nick Boyle, and Mark Andrews. They just love multiple tight end sets. So while it might be just a whole cast of characters you don't really want to see, and DeMarcus Robinson, James Prochet, all these guys are not hallmark names, but I think Isiah likely has an opportunity to show that while they have Mark Andrews, I think that Isiah likely might be more of like a wide receiver 3 instead of a tight end 2, but we'll kind of see how that unfolds.
And now, Daniel, I'll just give you some credit here because a lot of people after the draft, when a guy lands in a favorable position, they'll hitch themselves to a rookie and start talking about how much they really like this rookie. I remember you tweeting about Isiah likely before the draft. So I just want to give you credit. That's a guy that you have been talking about for a long, long time. And when I was watching that preseason game, when he blew up, what was it, like 100 yards in the second half?
Something like that, yeah.
One huge game. You were the guy I was thinking about because you were the one that put me onto Isiah.
I appreciate it.
So, Matt, we could talk more about who else we should possibly be targeting in this Baltimore Ravens pass catching room, but I'd also like to talk about the Bengals. Do you have anything to add about the pass catchers in Baltimore? Or do we want to talk about Joe Mixon a bit?
Well, we can do a little bit of both. I'll just say real quickly that I agree with Daniel that likely the nice thing about him is that Duvernay is going to get matched up against the top corner. Mm-hmm. And now I think I've always liked Duvernay, and I think that he's shown even early this year that he can win some one-on-one matchups. The most likely what will happen is that Andrews will be the deep middle guy. Yep. Then you'll have Duvernay being the field stretcher along the sideline, which then opens up likely for you. It's either going to open up likely or open up J.K. Dobbins. One of those guys are going to either have a big game in terms of target counts. But Duvernay is that guy that you can still have a shot at a big play because he can win, but it's a matter of how often he's going to get targeted. And I think that he's more of a boom bust play this week for that. And in terms of Mixon, I mean, listen, I'm going to hold on to Mixon. I know that the line hasn't played well, I understand, but it's about it's more of a cohesion thing. I think they're getting a little bit better in terms of, at least from a pass protection standpoint. And you look at the Ravens. I mean, their defense is not very strong right now. The secondary is very weak. And when you look at what teams like to do, they can spread this team out a little bit and then run up the middle. And while I like Justin Madubuike, the under tackle that they have, they really don't have a big dude there to clog up and hold up against double teams for Madubuike to penetrate and win on a consistent basis. So he'll make some flash plays against Mixon, but I think that the Bengals might be able to get healthy with their run game against the Ravens this week.
It would be nice to see, because the opportunity's there. And, in fantasy football, you want to chase opportunity. I mean, we've seen some not so great running backs get fed 25 times a game, and they put up elite fantasy seasons. And I don't want to say that, Joe Mixon isn't a good running back, but he hasn't looked so good this year. And I'll admit, it's tough to break tackles when you're getting hit in the backfield as soon as you touch the ball. I'd like to see what he can do with a full head of steam, but it seems like we haven't seen that yet. I mean, he is running into the back of his offensive line. He's getting blown up in the backfield. So, Daniel, same question to you, kind of with Joe Mixon here. What should fantasy managers be doing? Should you be going out and trying to acquire this guy? If you've got him, should you be trying to sell him, or do you just kind of hold and hope that things turn around?
Yeah, I'm with Matt in the sense that I'm holding him if I have him. And if I don't, I'm actually looking to acquire him. He's going to be cheaper to get. And like you said, the opportunities are there. It does take a little while for a brand new offensive line to gather that consistency, playing together in a brand new offensive scheme that, honestly, they're so obvious. Last year, if you go and watch the Bengals, it's leaked into this year too. When they go under center, they're running the football. Like, it's such they have such a tell. They've done a little bit better this year of getting into some play action and some shotgun runs. But a lot of times when they go under center, they're running the ball and they're tipping their hat to what Joe Mixon's going to be doing. And that doesn't help your offensive line or your running back. Joe Mixon, we know, has the talent to be a top 5 type of running back in the NFL. He has the burst. He has the size. He has the pass catching ability, the vision, the pace, all that stuff. It's just about the offensive line getting their chemistry down. This is week 5 now. You have lots of football left to play. If you're that down on Joe Mixon with the opportunities, you should not be looking to acquire him. But I'm telling you right now, I'm always going to be trying to get a player like that in a situation that will figure itself out eventually, especially when he's getting 26 plus opportunities a game. I'm always going to try to get someone like that.
Now you talk about the play calling and how the Bengals aren't really doing themselves any favors with the under center. But did you see somebody had pointed this out on the Bengals subreddit page right after last week's game, where Joe Mixon was telling his plays as well? If he was standing upright, he was blocking. And when he would crouch down, he was taking the ball as a running back. And the only time that he had crouched down and didn't take the ball as a running back was when he ran a wheel route and he was the first read. So, I mean, he was giving it away to the defense even more than the play calling was. So, you got to imagine if some random fan is able to pull that on Reddit and go through play by play and show that, that NFL coaches are catching on to this. So hopefully they can iron out some of those things, because they put a lot of money into that offensive line and it just hasn't been working out so far. The last thing I want to talk about in this game is Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins. And obviously, if you have either of these guys in your lineup, you are starting either of them and not even thinking twice about it. But for those of us that are playing DFS, it's tough to predict who is going to have a big game. But do you see any spots in this defense that could be exploited by either T. Higgins or Ja'Marr Chase? Do you have one that you prefer this week? Go ahead and start us off here, Matt.
Yeah, Chase all the way, because he's the big play threat. He's the deep threat. And when you look at what the Ravens have difficulty with these young cornerbacks, or their risk-friendly cornerbacks, because Daniel knows, being a Chiefs fan and Chiefs writer, that Marcus Peters is a live or die guy. He's terrific as a ball hawk, but it's like the baseball hitter who's the home run artist. You either win big or lose big sometimes with those guys. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you combine that with some of their zone coverages where they fail to pass off the player, the safety and the corner aren't on the same page. The guy who's going to kill you with that will be Ja'Marr Chase. And so in DFS, you're looking for that edge to be better than everybody else. So if everyone's going safer with the T. Higgins route, you want to hit it big with the guy that people have been down on a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, how funny that people are down on Ja'Marr Chase. I mean, this guy is still just putting up great numbers. It's not like he's just completely disappearing. He just hasn't been hitting the end zone like he did last year, but he is going to be just fine. Daniel, I saw you nodding. I think that you're going with Jamar Chase as well. So let's go ahead and move on to the Chiefs. But before we do that, we have a segment every single week on this show called the Sleeper Start of the Week. If you are not playing fantasy football on Sleeper by now, I don't know what you're doing. It is a fun app. And the best thing is that they are constantly making improvements. They have 22 new features this year that you have to be sure to check out. Sleeper.app, or you can check in the YouTube description below where you can have a link to download. But let's go ahead and talk about our Sleeper Starts of the Week.
It's time for the Sleeper Start of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
Daniel, go ahead and start us off here. Who is your Sleeper Start of the Week?
It's funny, this guy's actually turned into kind of a sleeper with the offense that he plays in. Terry McLaurin is just no one wants to play Terry McLaurin anymore. And I understand, but Carson Wentz is, weirdly enough, quarterback 10 on the season. Or
quarterback
11
14 last year. I don't know how he keeps doing it.
The offense is awful. He takes sacks. He just lobs the ball up. Funny enough, they're one of the worst third down offenses in the NFL in terms of yards to gain, but they complete a ton of them. So the opportunity, the air yards are always there for Terry McLaurin. Maybe it's not really a true sleeper, but people don't want to play Terry McLaurin. You have more than likely Jahan Dotson going to be out this week. The opportunities are going to be coming, okay? And they're going to be behind. This is a weird game. I'm pretty sure that they're playing the Cowboys, right? They're playing Cowboys this week, I think. Washington, yeah. So at worst, you're talking about him going up against Trayvon Diggs, who also a lot like Marcus Peters in that
going against
sense.
Tennessee this week.
Tennessee this week? Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's even better because they don't have a Trayvon Diggs out there that could get interceptions. So I think that you're really looking to get Terry McLaurin started this week. Again, the yards per target this year, 9.3. He's getting the air yards we've talked about. Everyone's talked about the air yards. The fact of the matter is that he's not getting enough volume, in my opinion. And Curtis Samuel's been the guy there so far, and Jahan Dotson's getting those touchdowns. So I think that this week is going to be a week that we can see McLaurin come back into the actual, you have to keep starting this guy because he's just too good to have this bad of a stretch and have it continue the whole season. So I'm firing up Terry McLaurin everywhere I have him and just assuming he's going for 25.
So a start this week and somebody that you should be targeting on the trade market is what I'm getting from that, Daniel.
Oh, yeah.
Matt, same question to you. Who is a guy that you are trying to start everywhere you can this week?
Well, I don't know about start everywhere I can, but as a sleeper of where if I need one and I need to pick a guy maybe off the waiver wire because late events happen and things go awry and you have to like work with the, turn lemons into lemonade. I think Nico Collins is that lemon you can turn into lemonade because when you look at Collins, he's averaging 18.8 yards per catch right now. And the way that and Davis Mills is a solid young quarterback who's getting better. Mm-hmm. And what you see is with that running game starting to, get into its groove, at least with what Dameon Pierce can do for you. And they're solidified that he's their guy moving forward and that you have, they tried a little bit with their tight end. They took one tight end and brought him on into the game last week. And then they stuck with OJ Howard a little bit. It seems like they may stay with Howard for a bit. So that's good. They've kind of solidified that. When you look at it from that perspective, Brandon Cooks is the primary guy. But you see that in the intermediate passing game, off of play action, the guy who runs the over routes in the middle of the field, the dig routes inside, the sail routes to the boundary, all throws that are really the wheelhouse of what, Davis Mills does well, who, he's not a great deep thrower, but he's a good intermediate thrower. And he and Collins are kind of hooking up well. And you look at the targets, he's starting to average about 5 to 6 targets a game. And he had a slow start, but now it's building. The past 3 games. He had like 9, 6 and 4. And so now he's like in that 4 to 6 target range. If he stays there, he's going to be fine. And against Jacksonville, I think that they're going to have open middle of the field for him to do some damage. And that's not a bad look, especially because these guys play each other tight. And the Jaguars will probably score enough that Houston will have to keep up.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of my content you consume, Matt, but I have been beating the drum for Nico Collins all offseason. He is one of my favorite guys.
Beautiful.
Daniel, I actually think that when we did our show together in the offseason, we talked at length about the Houston Texans offense and how Nico Collins was a guy that you should be going out and targeting at the end of your draft. So haven't seen it so far yet this season, but I'm with you, Matt. I'm hoping that we can get some exploitable opportunities for Nico Collins this week. Let's go ahead and move back into the meat of the show. And of course, I said that we would be talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. So we got the Las Vegas Raiders facing off in Kansas City against the Chiefs this week. And let's start off talking about Isiah Pacheco. And Daniel, you could start us off here. He is starting to creep into that Kansas City backfield more and more every single week. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I mean, he just keeps finding pay dirt. And because of that, he is still an elite fantasy option. I believe he is RB4 last I checked. But should we expect that going forward, or can Pacheco actually force some sort of committee here?
It's already a committee. If you're looking at the way that they play, they use 3 running backs pretty much every single week. Pacheco's getting more work now. He's getting a little bit more trusted. They also kind of understand they need some explosivity to the run game. And while Clyde has been up and down, I'll say, in terms of his vision and understanding some of the run concepts, he's a very to the point runner. Okay. I've talked about this at length the last year or so, that he runs the play to the bill. If it's not there, he doesn't always see it. And that's an issue for Clyde in terms of generating big plays. He's been better this year, especially lately. But Pacheco, he will miss lanes. He will run out of obvious holes. He's done it multiple times. He missed a touchdown 2 weeks ago. He missed an obvious first down that he would have had in a short yardage situation a few weeks ago against the Chargers. So it's gotten him to the point now where he's still learning, obviously. But the problem for Pacheco is that he was a 4-year player at Rutgers, and a lot of this stuff is basic running that you've done all of your time in college and even before that, and he's still having trouble with the fundamental reading. But the fact of the matter is that this is a committee. Clyde has been entrusted to be more of the pass-catching option. He's getting more targets. He is 3rd or 4th on the team in total pass-catching yards this year, and he's getting more goal line work than most people thought, because 2 years ago when he was a rookie, the Chiefs offensive line was hot garbage. They couldn't move anybody at the point of attack. And he had his Houston Texans game where he got like 4 straight carries and people were like, no, he's no longer the goal line back. But he's finding ways now. They have a better offensive line to that as well. But Pacheco is going to get more playing time, specifically because he adds juice to the running back room. He is he does things you can't teach. He does things that Clyde and McKinnon no longer can do. He just runs through guys and through arm tackles and kind of has that big-bodied physicality, jitterbug type of mentality that gets yards. He just finds ways to grind them out. So while Clyde's going to be the guy in terms of getting the more valuable touches year after or week after week, we're seeing Pacheco be that middle of the field guy who's like, okay, it's like the 40, the 50. We're going to run you out there. See how many yards you can get. If you get inside the 20, we'll probably bring back Clyde or McKinnon, but he's helping moving the offense and he's keeping them on time, which is great for them right now.
Yeah, and you talk about how, and that's why I laughed when you started saying it, how Clyde Edwards-Helaire he runs to the point. Like, he does exactly what he's supposed to. I think it was that one game 2 weeks ago where he had that run that kind of solidified the win for them. That was the first time I've ever seen a breakaway run from Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and he looked confused, like he didn't know what he was supposed to do. He busted through the secondary, and then you could see his head going side to side, like, what am I supposed to do now that he's in the open field? And, eventually got chased down. But we didn't even really talk about Jerick McKinnon all that much. We're talking about the timeshare between Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Isiah Pacheco, but Jerick McKinnon has seen a minimum of 23% of these snaps out of the backfield in every single game so far this year. So it is frustrating, and I think Pacheco is the guy that has upside that you want to stash that could carve out a bigger role. Matt, I want to get your take on this backfield, though, because it is messy. It is gross. The only guy I want here, like you said, sometimes it just makes sense to get the cheapest guy and hope for the best. And that's kind of what I've been doing with Pacheco.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I always saw him coming out of school as kind of an Emmitt Smith starter kit, which means that, again, none of the really advanced options. He's a guy who doesn't have great contact balance between the tackles. Like, he'll keep his feet, but he's not going to break a ton of tackles inside the box. He's a bully in space. Like, he will run through defensive back hits. He certainly understands how to manipulate zone runs, and he's good enough as a runner to run gap plays where you can be decisive and hit that. Whereas with Pacheco, he was more used to a gap style running offense. And I like seeing that the NFL as a whole has been running more gap plays because of the fact that the boxes are so much lighter now with the spread offenses. Now the two high shells. Now you have these like defensive backs disguised as linebackers who are in the box. And what do you do at that point? Well, you put big on little, and you marshal all your forces that way. So Pacheco's getting a little bit more of a runway to acclimate. But like Daniel said, there's still things that he has to learn and get better at. And part of what he had a problem with at Rutgers is that what he's not used to is that at Kansas City, the linemen pull on time and get to their spot where they're supposed to, whereas Pacheco needed to watch and decide, am I going to abandon the play and try and do something athletically, or am I going to follow it to its conclusion and be planted on my butt 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage? And I think that when you have that going on, you have to recalibrate what's working and learn to trust it. And he's not trusting things right now because like Clyde Edwards-Helaire hitting the open field and going, I'm not used to this. I think a little bit of Isiah Pacheco's problem is I'm not used to waiting for my slow center at Rutgers or my guard to pull around center, and I'm already ready to hit the hole, and he's still halfway across the behind of the center. So those things take time. But that said, I mean, Edwards-Helaire is safe. I don't think you're going to see Pacheco overtake him this year. But Andy Reid, I think historically has done this. I mean, I know Daniel knows this better than anybody who's a Chiefs fan, but I was always a big fan of guys like Spencer Ware and folks like that. Andy Reid likes to do committees, incrementally give guys more looks as they start to prove themselves. And if they start to outplay somebody in all facets of the game, then he makes them the kind of the guy within the committee. But if they fail a few times, they go back into the straight up platoon system. And I think that's where we're at right now. Is and if he has a clear superstar like Michon McCoy or Jamal Charles, he'll abandon that mess. But if he doesn't have that, he just uses them to the way that he can. And McKinnon's more the guy who can do everything well enough and be a good enough pass protector. And Clyde's not a pass protector. We know this. Like if Clyde's in the backfield and they throw, he's going wide, or he's chipping somebody and circling around. Pacheco's got more potential in that regard. So Pacheco could gain value in 2-minute offense if he continues to prove himself in, as far as pass protection, but it's unlikely this year. It's probably more for next year. He's going to have to show that improvement. So yeah, Clyde's my guy. If you're looking at it from this perspective as a safety type of play, but really more as a high-end running back too, who's just disguised as a running back one right now due to the red zone touches.
Yeah. And it's very rare that we hear that the rookie is the one who is the better pass blocker. But yeah, like you said, that's one of CH's biggest knocks so far, and could cause him to lose some snaps in the future. Last thing I want to talk about though with the Kansas City Chiefs are the wide receivers. I mean, no surprise here, but Travis Kelce is leading the team in targets. After that, though, it's kind of a muddied mess. You got Juju Smith-Schuster. He's got 27 targets on the year. Marquez Valdes-Scantling has 23 targets on the year. They are the wide receiver 47 and wide receiver 61, respectively. You've also got McCole Hardman, who they try to scheme some touches up for here and there. Sky Moore has been pretty much non-existent so far as a rookie. So outside of these running backs that we might want to take a chance in week and week out, and obviously Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, Daniel, are we starting any wide receivers in Kansas City in fantasy?
If you have like 3 must-start wide receivers and 3 flex, maybe. But it's really hard to justify starting Juju and MVS every week. Now, I will say that they are actively trying to get MVS the ball down the field. It's an active anticipation from Mahomes trying to do that. It's multiple weeks now. He missed just barely a touchdown against Indy. They got him down the seam against 2 high shell against the Bucs last week. They are really trying to get him the ball down the field. So one of these weeks, MVS is going to have a 25, 30-point week because he scores 2 touchdowns on top of these deep targets. You just don't know when that's going to be. And we've also just seen Juju be a possession receiver, which is exactly what I expected him to be in Kansas City when he was brought over. He doesn't have the elite yak ability. He's really more of as soon as he catches the ball, he turns into a running back type of player who, yeah, he might be able to run through a couple yards after contact, but he's not breaking tackles anymore. He's not running down the sideline anymore. Moss and guys. It's not his game anymore. He is in this offense as a, hey, look, it's third down, 3rd and 10, maybe 3rd and short. We're going to get to you, if not Travis Kelce, and you're going to move the chains for us. And that's really what he's been. We're starting to see a little more creativity with the way he's used, so we can get a little bit more upside in PPR leagues as a, more of a floor-based wide receiver and a flex play. But he's not somebody you can start with confidence. MVS, like I said, good luck figuring that out. You can't play McCole Hardman right now. You can't do it because he's not only is he hurt, he's not getting enough real targets to actually matter. But I will say, Sky Moore, you're going to want to be keeping a close eye on what's going on. He got 22 snaps last week. Mm-hmm. He was always open. I watched the game, just watched the game back, and I'm like, this was one thing that we knew coming out of Western Michigan is that he's always open. He knows how to get open. The one thing that he always understood how to do is release packages and his route running. He gets open on demand, and that's something that this offense desperately needs. So his snaps are going to start going up. You're going to start to see those targets creep up a little bit here and there as Mahomes gains trust. That's the biggest undetermined factor that most people forget in this offense, that Mahomes needs your trust. That's why Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill have been the offense over the last couple of years. Now he's got a brand new wide receiver set, and they're all earning his trust. Sky Moore is going to be someone that does it over the next 5-6 weeks, and by the end of the season, I think he's probably taking over a guy like an MBS or a McCole Hardman and playing those snaps and getting you actual relevant fantasy points.
Yeah, agree with everything there. Now I want to cover one more game, and we only have a few minutes left, so we're going to keep this one quick. But I feel like we have to talk about this because the biggest storyline from last week, I think, was Mitch Trubisky getting yanked, Kenny Pickett going in, and all of a sudden seeing some life in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So there's two things I want to talk about. And Matt, you could start us off here. One, how does Kenny Pickett change the offense, if at all? And two, are we looking at George Pickens now starting to elevate himself up the depth chart a little bit? After a quiet first 3 weeks, he had his first 100-yard game. He saw 37% of the targets that Kenny Pickett threw. So two-part question here to wrap up the show, Matt. One, how does Kenny Pickett change things? Two, is George Pickens the real deal?
I think George Pickens can be the real deal, but it's going to depend on how teams adjust to Kenny Pickett after the first 4 to 5 weeks. Because one of the things that happens, and it's like we don't see this every year, which is quarterbacks who are rookies get inserted in the middle of games. They play well, or they show something that people get excited about, and they do that for 3 to 4 games, maybe 4 or 5. And then the NFL teams, which usually take 4 to 6 games of scouting players before they implement anything that they've seen, then start to implement things. And that's when those players start to regress a little bit or decline because now there's some packages put in there against them. So expect Kenny Pickett to have a few good games right off the bat, and where, the defenses aren't really tailored against him as much. He's going to take a few more chances with Pickens. He's going to be more confident with his placement with throws. So that can be a positive. I don't necessarily think he's going to dethrone Deontay Johnson as the wide receiver 1 every week, but he may have 1 or 2 weeks where he does have a better opportunity because he's going to get to draw the easier matchup. And then they can leverage that in that fashion. So I like that as well. And I got to say, I love Daniel's take on Kansas City, because it's like the way I look at that offense is it's like taking a broom and ever try sweeping like fine grained dirt off a patio with the wind blowing at you.
Yes,
that's basically, you got to wait for the wind. Well, if you live out there, you probably would, but you got to wait for the wind to change direction, and when that wind changes direction, I think he knows who the 2 players are that you got to look out for, which is Juju and especially Sky Moore. Yep. So I love all of that.
Daniel, same question over to you, though, just in regards to the Pittsburgh Steelers, just to wrap up the show here. How are we feeling about Kenny Pickett going forward? And how are we feeling about George Pickens?
I like Kenny Pickett. He wasn't like blow you away at Pittsburgh, but I think the one difference is that the deep ball accuracy is that a lot of people have watched the Pittsburgh Steelers offense and they say, well, they're not getting the ball very deep. But I mean, I don't know if you guys watch Mitch Trubisky just throw up ducks down the field. He's so inaccurate with his deep ball placement that it makes the offense inept. He's a guy who's, if he's not throwing the ball down the field inaccurately, he's taking the safe play.
You're giving Dave flashbacks, man.
Obviously.
People that listen to this show know very well that I'm a Bears fan, and I the scars of Mitch Trubisky are fresh.
So I mean, it's so different because in the macro sense that I think that Kenny Pickett changes the dynamic because he's going to add more explosive plays down the field, more accurately placed balls, like Matt was talking about. That's going to be the big difference here, is because he can actually get it downfield. It's going to help Deontay Johnson a lot. And for me, when I look at him going in there and targeting George Pickens a lot, when you come in as a rookie, obviously you're the second guy. Mitch Trubisky was the starter. So in training camp, George Pickens and Kenny Pickett probably developed a nice trust relationship factor. So he's inserted into a game where he wasn't taking the first team reps. He wasn't preparing to start. So that means that he's going to start going to where he trusts. If a play breaks down or he gets moved out of the pocket, guess where he's going to? I'm going to go to the side where my guy is, and that's where George Pickens is. He's going to have a full week now to get an entire offensive scheme built around him for the coming week against the Bills. So I do think you're going to see Deontay Johnson still be the guy. But again, George Pickens is a baller. He has shown that he is a baller and he can make plays out of nothing. There was a specific play last week against the Jets where he underthrew the deep ball, but he identified the single coverage on a wheel route to George Pickens, and the safety was coming underneath, and you saw him identify it quickly and throw it. He just underthrew it, but George Pickens says, I don't care. I'm going to go get the ball, and he does. So you're going to see a lot of those plays, and I think that he could add an explosivity to this offense that's been lacking.
Yeah, George Pickens is not my wide receiver one in this rookie class. I mean, there's a lot of talented rookies that came in this year, but I think when all said and done after this season, I think George Pickens might have the best highlight reel. I mean, this guy is incredible when it comes to making contested catches.
One play did it was enough.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, that immediately, I think you could put that in like a top 20 all-time catches in the NFL. I mean, just fun stuff to see. Well, guys, I wish we could have covered more shows, but this just means we're having good conversation if we don't get through all or more games, but we're having good conversation. So no regrets there whatsoever. Before we log off, though, one more time, Matt, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
At Matt Waldman, MattWaldmanRSP.com, Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room, Matt Waldman RSP on TikTok, and of course, Footballguys.com.
Absolutely. YouTube.com/footballguys as well. Matt, let everyone know, or I'm sorry, Daniel, let everyone know where they can find you.
At Way 19 on TikTok, on Twitter, and at rgrfootball.com, as well as the Fantasy Football Astronauts podcast.
And of course, I am Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. That's Kluge. Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video. Leave a reply below if you've got anything to add. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, and I will see you next week. Thank you for checking this video out. As always, be sure to follow me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video. Leave a reply below if you have anything to add. All of our shows can be found on youtube.com/footballguys. In addition to this show, the Launchpad, we've also got the Audible. We have our short videos coming at you every single day. The DFS Power Grid, the Mailbag Show, the Dynasty Show, Dynasty Newsletter Show, the College Show, and so much more. So be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys. Thank you so much for checking out this episode, and I'll see you next week.